Welcome to the session. This is not my normal setup and session. If you ever come to my live sessions that I run most weeks, I'm actually on holiday right now. I'm in Spain, and so I've had to bring some stuff with me, like a webcam and so on. I did actually bring my portable studio, but my battery ran out on the camera. There's something's wrong with the power here in Spain. Anyway, we'll go as it is. It's live, as Paul said. So today, yes, we'll be looking at this issue of pricing, something that I have been teaching now, over 20 years. And so I'm going to show you some of the big mistakes. But before I do that, let me just give you a bit of my background. So I am an accountant. I'm a chartered accountant from the UK. Been in the profession for over 30 years now. 1988, I left university in Sheffield in the UK, and qualified after 3 years. Worked for a large multi-partner firm. And then in 1996 decided that I would start my own accounting firm. I had no clients. I bought a desk, a computer, had a spare room in the house, and set up shop. And it was an exciting time. And little did I know, though, back then, how challenging the next 2.5 years would be. I made every mistake in the book. I found that by the end of 1998, 2.5 years in, I grew fast. If you looked at my firm from the outside in, you'd have thought, wow, Mark's building a big practice here. I'd moved offices twice. I'd grown to over 200 clients in 2 years. I had a huge team of people working for me, and I was almost broke. I was working crazy long hours, and I just wasn't making money. And I couldn't work it out because I'd been on all the seminars, listened to the gurus talking about how many hours you should put on your timesheet as a sole practitioner, and I was keeping the timesheets and doing everything like 70% chargeable hours, and I still wasn't making money. And that wasn't until end of 98 I met somebody who changed my life. His name was Steve Pipe, and I went on his 3-day event called the Accountant's Masterclass. He opened my eyes to a different way of running an accounting firm. And then in the middle of 1999, I had the huge pleasure to meet Paul Dunn. I went on the 4-day accountants boot camp down in Eastbourne in the UK, and that just blew my mind, some of the things that you talked about, Paul, on over those 4 days. And it was you that introduced me and recommended Ron Baker.
Yes, it was.
Who is the third of my big heroes: Steve Pipe, Paul Dunn, and Ron Baker, the 3 people that have shaped my life and my career. And it was Ron that I met in late 99, and he was the first person to explain to me this concept of value pricing, which I'd never heard of. I'd grown up in the profession believing you had to keep timesheets, believing you had to bill based on the hour. And when Ron talked about value pricing, suddenly, and I know you'll meet Ron soon on the next session, when Ron explained it to me, this light bulb went on, and I thought, wow, that makes so much sense. So I went and made changes in my accounting firm from late 99 onwards, and the results were extraordinary. So much so that Steve Pipe asked me to speak at his first ever, he just started AVN. I spoke at his first AVN conference in February 2000, and something I said resonated because the feedback was so good. He asked me to speak at every one of his events. Steve and I then went into business together at AVN. We ran AVN for a decade. I sold my accounting firm to my client managers. Steve and Jonathan bought it from me. And now I run the Value Pricing Academy. I teach predominantly value pricing to the profession every single week. I am, except when I'm on holiday. Well, even when I'm on holiday, I teach value pricing, hence I'm here. And so that's what I do. I help people get much higher prices, build much more profitable accounting firms. I work with people all around the world, predominantly the US, Canada, the UK, and South Africa. So with that said, let's dive into. I've got a lot of content, but I'm sure you may have some questions, and I think if there are questions come in later on, we'll deal with those. If you've got questions, you can put them in the chat box. And any comments you've got, stick in the chat box. There is actually a Q&A box as well. I prefer if people use the Q&A box just because it's easy to manage, but because I've got Paul here,
you can do it wherever you want. Yeah, maybe we can do this. Maybe we can do this. Put some comments in the chat. If you go right on, Mark, put that in the chat. And if you've got a specific question, like really question mark, pop it up in the Q&A. That'll work.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. And if you're expecting a slide presentation, I don't do slide decks very often. I had a couple of things to show you, but I've got some emergency technology right now with a conventional webcam, so you've just got me. But anyway, let's get started. We're going to share, my goal is to try and get through 7 of the big mistakes that we make in the profession. I think all 7 of these I made in my accounting firm, and they cost me tens of thousands in lost profit, these mistakes that I made, and I'm hoping that if nothing else, by the end of this session, I can help you to avoid some of the big mistakes that I made that cost me so much, not just money, but emotionally, the challenges that I was having back then. And I find that many firms are doing the same things. And one of the things I notice with accounting firms around the world is that most firms tell me they are working crazy hard, crazy long hours, struggling just to make ends meet. And the root cause of that is pricing. It's the root cause. If we can solve that, everything is much easier. So the first thing the first message I want to share with you is that you are too cheap. And you need to put your price up, okay? And no arguing, you are too cheap, you need to put your price up. It's as simple as that. The trouble is, I sometimes get the reaction from people when I say, your tax turn price is too cheap, you should be charging more. Or the price you're charging for your annual financial statements is too cheap, you should charge more. I sometimes get people say, yeah, but Mark, that's the going rate for in our area, that's the market price. And one of the things that I can say with absolute certainty is there is no such thing as a going rate for accounting services. There is no such thing as a market price. And the reason I can tell you that is over the last, 15, 20 years now, I've been doing benchmarking studies of how much accounting firms charge for various services. And sometimes I look at how to price tax returns, sometimes bookkeeping. I did a huge survey of 2,683 accounting professionals talking about finding out how much we charge for bookkeeping services a couple of years back. And what I found, as I always find when I ask these prices, is the range of prices is huge from the cheapest to the most expensive. And for example, the survey back in 2019 I did on how to price bookkeeping, which is, incidentally, if you want a copy of that research report, I'll put a link in the chat box fairly soon. You can grab that. In that research report, the prices, for example, for if we look at hourly rates I'll give it in US dollars. They ranged from at the cheapest end for bookkeeping, someone was charging as little as $25 for an hour for bookkeeping. At the other end of the spectrum, it was 175. That's a 7-fold difference between the cheapest and the most expensive. A 7-fold, not 10, 20% higher prices, 7 times. And every benchmarking study I've done over the last 20 years says the same thing. The difference in price, the range of prices from the cheapest to the most expensive is typically 5 to 10 times different. If there was a market price for accounting services, if there's market price, we would see a much narrower range of prices, and we don't. Pricing in our profession is all over the place, and that's partly because the profession doesn't know how to price, and partly we're not selling commodities, we're selling a professional service. So of course, whatever we do is going to be different to the firm down the road. We are individual firms doing very tailored services for our clients. We're not selling cups of coffee. So we would expect to have prices all over the place. So you absolutely can put your prices up. You are too cheap. I know that's the case because I am seeing firms doing the same work as you, charging 2, 3, 4 times the price. So that's the first mistake, too cheap. Second big mistake that I want to cover is this. And again, it links to this idea of my message, putting your prices up. When I say you need to put your prices up, the other reaction I get, and I ask this when I'm on the stage doing keynotes and workshops, I ask the audience, give me a show of hands, put your hands up if the reason you're not putting your prices up is because you have price sensitive clients. And when I ask that question, I see a forest of hands go up. Everyone says, yes, I have price sensitive clients. And this is the single biggest myth in our profession when it comes to pricing. It's a huge myth. You do not have any price sensitive clients. And I know that right now you think I'm mad, understandably, but you don't. Let me explain. What does price sensitive mean? Price sensitive means it's somebody who always wants the cheapest. And yes, there are price-sensitive people in society. When we look at the research done by price psychologists, by behavioural economists, we see there are price-sensitive people, but it's not as many as we think. The surveys suggest it's somewhere between 20 and 30% of society, the minority. Most people are what's called value sensitive. And what that means is when we look at the value equation is made up of the benefits we get when we buy something and the cost to acquire it. Call that the price. Now, a price sensitive person only cares about the price. They want the cheapest. But a value sensitive person cares about the gap, the profit on the deal. What do they get back over and above what they have to pay, what they have to give up? That's a value sensitive person. Most people are value sensitive, and your clients are value sensitive. For example, let me explain and illustrate that. If you think about your clients right now, do you have any clients that happen to own a product by Apple, whether that's an iPhone, an iPad, an iMac, whatever it might well be? Do you have clients that own Apple products? And I'm sure the answer is yes. Every single one of those clients of yours that owns an Apple product, by definition, cannot be price sensitive. Because there are cheaper phones, cheaper tablets, cheaper computers in the marketplace. An Apple customer cannot be price sensitive. If you think about your clients and where they might go to get their coffee in the morning on their way to the office, if you have clients that grab a coffee from a Starbucks or Costa Coffee or one of those other coffee chains, again, anybody that buys coffee in the morning from Starbucks cannot be price sensitive. There's cheaper ways of getting your coffee fix in the morning. So your clients are not price sensitive, they are value sensitive. The reason why we think they're price sensitive, and I made this mistake all the time back in the 1990s when I ran my accounting firm, the reason why we think that is because at some point you have probably given a price, you've presented a price to a client, to a prospective client, and you've had that reaction that we all hate. Wow, that's expensive. That's more than I'm expecting. And we hate that reaction. And when we get that reaction, our natural assumption is that they are price sensitive, And when we start to get that reaction several times from 2, 3, 4, 5 clients, we then start to extrapolate in our mind and start to assume that everyone's price sensitive. And what happens is when we think they're price sensitive, what happens is we focus our conversation on talking about price and not on the value of what we do, not on the benefits of what we do. So that's the reason why we think we have price sensitive clients, because of that reaction. However, the reason why, and this is really critically important, the reason why somebody says to you when you reveal your price, that's expensive, it's not because you're expensive, because I know that's not true. You are too cheap, you have to put your prices up. That's not why they say that's expensive, because it's not true. They say that's expensive because they don't understand what's in it for them. They don't understand the benefit. They don't see the value. When you say, yes, we can do your tax return for you and it'll cost you £500, you'll probably get that's expensive, because they don't see the value of that. And that's all about communication. We have to become better at communicating the value of what we do, of our services. So that's mistake number 2, that we assume people are price sensitive. And when we think that, it just affects the way we think about price. And once we change it, everything flips. Everything flips. When we realize that people are really value sensitive, when our clients are value sensitive, we realize that the conversation has to be about the size of the gap. We want to focus on the gap, focus on the value in our words, in our positioning, in the language that we use, not the price. Sorry, I got distracted because Paul suddenly filled my screen for some reason, which is great. Hi there, Paul.
Sorry, go ahead.
Also I saw a comment come on. Someone said, actually, it was Paul said right on in the comments box. Okay. So when we understand that it's about value, then everything changes in our mindset, the way that we think. Okay, let's move on to number 3, and the third big mistake that we make is, and by the way, I've got a lot to cover, but I'm on target, so I will have time to answer questions. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box, please put them or in the Q&A, whatever works for you, and we'll deal with questions. The third thing that is a big mistake that we make is we don't give people choice. Now, what I mean by that is that when we're customers, when we buy anything, we're all individuals, we're all different, we have different wants, we have different needs, we all want choice. And so we need to figure out how do we give people choice. Also, when we think about moving away from this crazy notion of pricing based on the hour and instead pricing based on value, one of the things we recognize is that the problem with value pricing, the difficulty, the reason why many people struggle with value pricing is because value itself is subjective. You can't touch and feel it. And as my friend Ron Baker says, and you'll meet Ron soon in the next session, Ron says, value is in the hearts and minds of customers. Everybody values things differently. No two people place the same value on something. And so when you present a price, let's say that you have somebody come to you wanting a tax return and you say, yes, I can do your tax return, it's £500, then that's categorically the wrong price. It's the wrong price. And it's the wrong price because the chances are that that's exactly the right price. The price that they're thinking in their mind is what it's worth is so remote, so improbable that it won't be that. It'll be the number that they're willing to pay, that they're happy to pay for your tax return, will not be 500 bang on the nail. It will be a different number, either a higher number or a lower number. If it's a lower number, then you lose out, because if you say it's going to cost 500 and they're thinking it's only worth 200, they're going to say no, and you lose the sale. But equally, as you build up the value of your tax return prep service, they might be thinking in their mind, wow, this is going to save me so much hassle, take away all this stress I have about taxes and the tax man. It's got to be worth £1,000. And you give a price of 500. Great. You make a sale. You get a customer. They would have paid you more money. You've just thrown money away. We have to recognize that everybody values things differently. A single price is always the wrong price. We have to find out how much people are willing to pay. And one way of doing that is by giving people choice. And so there are a number of different ways that we can do that. One of those is something that is called sometimes versioning. I call it menu pricing. It's giving people different options. So if you're selling a tax return, think of it, if you like, as your bronze, your silver and your gold tax return. And the reason we give people choices, is firstly because customers like choice. We're all different. We're all individuals. We all have different wants, different needs. We want to be able to choose. When we buy something, we want to feel like we're in control of the process, that we've got a range of different options so that we can choose the one that best reflects our particular needs, our wants, best reflects our circumstances, and best reflects the value of what we attach on something. So going back to the tax return analogy, one client might only want to pay 200, one might want to pay 1,000. If you have a single price of 500, it's the wrong price. And so we have to figure out a way of giving them a choice. And when we give them choices, what happens is people choose the one based on what they value. That means that some people will choose to pay you a higher price because they feel they're getting more. If you only ever offer one choice, one option, then you're leaving money on the table. If you think about it, all the most profitable companies on the planet do this. If you go to buy an iMac from Apple, if you go onto Apple's website right now, their Apple store, you will see they give you some choices. There's different packages. There's different packages of iMac. There's actually 3, and there's a reason for that. They give you different choices. If you go to Starbucks for a cup of coffee and you want a latte, for example, they give you different choices based, in that case, on size. The tall, which is the small one, I kind of don't get that, but the tall one anyway, the grande, and then the venti. If Starbucks only offered one choice, if they just offered a tall latte, that was it, you can buy a latte, they would be throwing away millions and millions of dollars because they know that everyone's different. And so we have to give choices. So that's the third mistake that we make. We don't give choice. Second mistake is we don't give certainty, and this is a big one. When clients buy, when we buy as customers, we want certainty. We want to know exactly what are we getting and what's the price right up front before we make that decision of what to buy. There was a research study done, it's a while back now, in the UK. It was November 2005. It was done by Sage, the software company, and Sage surveyed thousands and thousands of business owners in the UK. And one of the questions they asked was an interesting question. They said, what is the thing that you hate the most about your accountant? Interesting, we'd like to know the answer to that one. The number one answer by a long way was surprise bills. They hate surprise bills. What do they mean by that is not knowing with certainty right up front what the price will be. When we think about it, that's exactly what we've inflicted on our clients for years with the way that we price. And the more I think about it, I realise I hate that when I'm thinking about dealing with firms of lawyers. I hate it when I go to a firm of lawyers. I want a contract written up. I want something created, and I say to the lawyer, so tell me, what's it going to cost to do that? And they say, well, our hourly rate is £200 an hour. Okay, great. What's my next question as a customer? My next question, obviously, is, okay, how many hours will it take? To which the lawyer will answer, we have no idea. We've not done the work yet. But trust us, we're professionals. We keep accurate timesheets. We log every hour. We log every phone call. And at the end of the process, we'll send you a nice itemized bill setting out exactly what we've done, the number of hours, and what it's going to cost. I hate that. I hate that. And your clients hate it too, because that's what Sage found way back in 2005. We all hate it because as customers, we want certainty up front. And so we absolutely must not price based on the hour. There's actually many reasons for that. And I remember, as I say, you'll meet Ron Baker. In Ron's first book that I read, he gave 13 reasons not to price based on the hour.
Exactly.
All great reasons. I think I have a few extra on top of that. But out of all the reasons, there's one that should be sufficient. If your clients hate hourly billing, if your clients hate not knowing the price right up front, then for no other reason, we should stop doing it. We should stop doing it because our clients hate it. Now, there are many other reasons that we should stop doing it as well. Another is, in all my benchmarking studies, accounting firms that price based on the hour get lower prices, make less money. So it's not good for you either, okay? It's not good for anybody. So we need to stop pricing based on the hour. So that's mistake number
4.
I think I'm up to 4 so far. I think I'm up to 4.
Yes, you are. You're 4, Mark. You're 4.
4. Thank you. So let's go on to number 5. So the fifth one that I want to talk about is we want to give certainty, and that means we want to give people a price right up front. And so what I found when I first came across value pricing, for me, I'd never heard of it. This was 1999. I'd never heard of value pricing. I started teaching it myself in 2000 because of the results that I was getting. I was working at AVN with Steve, and every month I was doing sessions every year on teaching how I was learning how to price and the results I was getting. And what I found in 2000, 2001, 2002, like me, almost nobody had heard of value pricing. In the last decade, I've seen a huge change, a huge shift, and now it's become one of the most talked about subjects in the profession. There's now so many people teaching value pricing. Until 5 or 6 years ago, it was just me and Ron Baker. The two of us were teaching value pricing. Now everyone seems to be teaching value pricing. Why? Because it's so powerful. It's so powerful, and yet many people are really struggling with it. There's so much misconception. There are so many things that are being said that are wrong. People talk about value pricing, they talk about value billing, which is nonsensical, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We have all sorts of strange people who have some strange thoughts as to what value pricing means. And the one thing that I have found that's been a trend over the last decade is that in the last 10 years, people are now recognizing that we need to change the way we price. I think most firms now know that we have to move away from billing based on the hour. It's a crazy way to price. And so that message is getting through, which is great. I'm so pleased with that people are finally getting the message that we have to stop pricing based on the hour. And people are recognizing from a conceptual point of view, people realize that pricing based on value makes more sense. But what I've been finding is this huge shift where people are now moving to giving fixed prices. Sometimes, particularly in the US and Canada, they refer to them as flat fees, giving people fixed prices. And the big misconception, the big mistake, is that people think that giving a fixed price is value pricing. And the answer is, it's nowhere near. It's not the same thing. Fixed pricing, the way that most people price, is not value pricing. You see, when we start to really look at pricing, there are many different pricing models, and I know of at least over 40 different models. You may have heard of, obviously, time-based billing's one. It's a pricing model. There's percentage pricing, there's contingent pricing, there's menu pricing, package pricing, there's demand-based pricing, dynamic pricing. There are so many pricing methodologies, pricing models, that it gets a bit confusing. However, we can simplify it, because essentially there are only two ways to price. Only two ways. Number one, cost plus pricing. What that means is that we add up the costs of creating something, our service, our product. We add up the costs. We add on to that our hoped for profit margin, and magically that's the price. If you've ever studied economics and the law of supply and demand, then that focuses on the supply side of the equation. The problem is, it ignores the customer. It ignores what the customer wants. And so value pricing, which deals with the demand side of the equation, the value pricing flips everything on its head. It starts with the customer. It starts with what do they value? And then based on what they value, we come up with a price. So they're the two ways to price. It's either cost plus or value pricing. And all of these different pricing models that we might hear of, whether it's fixed fees, flat fees, hourly billing, whether it's dynamic pricing, contingent pricing, percentage pricing, all these different pricing models are all a form of either cost plus pricing, value pricing, or hybrid somewhere in the middle. And one of the things I learned from Ron Baker was that, and he talked about where this came from way back at the start of the last century, is that the Austrian School of Economists demonstrated that cost plus pricing is an inferior way of pricing. And yet for some reason the professions, the accounting profession, the legal profession, we clung on to this cost plus pricing for some reason, because I think we think it's easy. And so what we're finding is that people are shifting now to giving a fixed price up front because of the reasons I said. The hourly pricing based on the hour is crazy. Customers hate it. People want certainty. They want a price up front. And so over the last 10 years, I've seen this shift of people moving to fixed pricing. But as I say, fixed pricing is not value pricing. Fixed pricing, the way the profession does it, is still a form of cost plus pricing. What do I mean by that? Well, the way that we used to price was based on the hour, which is an hourly rate. If we think about it, an hourly rate is based on, it's a calculation that we make that is designed to cover our costs. So an hourly rate is usually a multiple of chargeable salary costs, typically between 3 and 3.5 times salary costs, which is designed to cover the cost of our employee, the chargeable salaries, plus overhead, and then we build in a profit element. It's cost plus pricing. When you give a fixed price up front, if you move to fixed pricing, I applaud you for doing that, because as we know from the research by Sage, that your clients hate the hourly bill. They hate not knowing the price. They hate surprise bills. They want certainty. And so the good thing about fixed pricing is it's fairer on the customer. We're giving a price up front to the customer. They get certainty. So fixed pricing is a good thing to do. It's a good place to start, but it's not value pricing. So why isn't it value pricing? Because when I see people giving fixed prices, I then ask the question, why is your price for doing a tax return £500? Why 500? Where's that 500 come from? And the answer I get is something along the lines of this. They say, it's £500 because based on my experience, based on all my years of doing tax returns and doing returns for this type of client with this type of complexity, I know it takes me about 5 hours. And I charge £100 an hour. So that's where my 500 comes from. So great, we're giving the client certainty, but our thinking is that price is still based on how long it's going to take. The only difference is it's now based on our estimate, our best guess at how long it's going to take. It's still a form of cost plus pricing. It's still cost plus pricing. When we are thinking about our costs, when we think about inputs, when we think about how long something's going to take when we're coming up with a price, in our minds we're still in that cost plus mentality. We're not value pricing. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Fixed pricing is a great place to start. I talk a lot about the pricing journey. As I said earlier, I've been teaching the profession value pricing now since I started in 1999-2000. So over 20 years. And what I found in the early days, I was trying to get people to move straight to value pricing. And a lot of people struggle with that. They struggle with value pricing because it's difficult, it's hard, it's challenging. It's hard because, for the reasons I said, value is subjective. You can't touch, feel and measure it. It's hard because everybody values things differently. And it's also hard, the third reason it's so hard in our profession is because unlike Starbucks selling coffee, we're selling extremely complex services. If we think about bookkeeping, for example, when we sell bookkeeping services, every client is different. The scope of the work is different. Some clients are big clients with lots of transactions. Some are small clients with only a few transactions. Some have great records. Some have terrible records. Some have complications because of the industry they're in. Every client is different. Every project we do is completely different. And so value pricing is difficult. People struggle with how to do it. They get the conceptually, yes, it makes sense. If we deliver more value, we should charge a higher price. But how do we do it? How do we do it? And so people think that the answer is let's just give a fixed price, as if that's value pricing. It's not. But I talk about the pricing journey. Rather than if you are pricing based on the hour right now, my advice would be don't try and go from hourly to value pricing. It's too big a leap. It's too challenging to try and do that. What I always talk about is take it one step at a time. It's a journey. Think of it as one thing at a time. Just implement one thing. And the first thing I do recommend people do is if they're on hourly, if you're pricing based on the hour right now, move to fixed pricing. Move to fixed pricing. It's not value pricing. Let's understand that. Let's recognize that. But at least giving a fixed price up front, it's fairer on the customer. It's fair on our clients. They like it. It's much better. And of all the steps on the journey, that's probably the hardest one to make. To go from the hourly mindset to giving a price up front. Given the complexity that we have, given the complexity of every single client, how do we come up with a price for doing bookkeeping for a client that we've never acted before? How do we know how long it's going to take? So we need to figure out how to get over that hurdle. We need to figure out a process so that we can give a fixed price with confidence, knowing that that price will give us a profit. Once we can do that, once we can give fixed pricing, actually what we do then to move towards value pricing is then becomes a lot easier. The steps that we can start to implement. So for example, one of the things I talk about is the first step to value pricing, a fairly easy one to implement. Once we've got over this hurdle of being able to give a fixed price with confidence, then when we recognize that everyone values things differently and this concept of menu pricing or versioning, then giving people a choice of different packages. I'll use the terminology bronze, silver, gold. So rather than saying to somebody, we can do your tax return, it's going to cost you 500, which is the wrong price, we say to somebody, we can do a tax return, and we have three different choices three different core service that you can choose, depending on what's most appropriate to you, and where you see the things that best give you what you want. And we have our bronze one, it's £350. We have this one that's 500. We have this one at 750. Because people like choice, as I said, people like choice. That's why we do that. But also because when we give people choice, they spend more money. And the reason why I call menu pricing the first step towards value pricing is because what we can then start to do is, and when I teach this in detail, the thought process is, let's now think about, even if we're in this cost plus mindset, this hourly mindset, which takes a while to wean ourselves off it. We have to wean ourselves off it. But when you're starting this journey, you could always, as you're getting used to it and trying it out, make the entry level, the bronze, based upon what you feel you need to get to make it profitable. You can base it as cost plus. But when you think about your more expensive options, then look at what value you're delivering in those, and then start to think about, okay, so what's it really worth to do this extra meeting, or to produce this extra report, or to do things faster? What's it worth to the client? And as Ron Baker will tell you, it's all about judgment. Value pricing is judgment. There's no formula for value pricing, it's judgment. We use our judgment, but the great thing about giving 3 choices is we now have a system that becomes testable. And one of the key things about pricing is we have to test. We have to keep testing. There's no such thing as the right price, there's always a better price. And we have to keep testing. And menu pricing gives us a structure to test against. So if, for example, you have 3 tax returns, a bronze, silver and gold, and you offer those to your clients, and you find, as many people do when they first go through this journey and start to implement the things I teach, if you find a lot of people are going for the premium, most expensive one, then that's great. It's great because you're perhaps making more money than when you just sold a single tax return. But it's also telling you something. If everybody's buying the most expensive, it means that they would be willing to pay even more money. And we could start to test and change things. If, of course, conversely, everybody's still buying the cheapest one, it probably means that you've not built in enough value or communicated the value of the more expensive packages. And so we can learn from what people are choosing, which ones they choose, which options they choose. And that's how we start to then go on this value pricing journey, because what we'll find is that the more that we create the right value, the more we communicate the value to their clients, the more we will find people will buy those more expensive options. And it doesn't matter that those extra things don't take much in terms of time. Costs are irrelevant. Costs are completely irrelevant. It's all about the customer. So how are we doing for time? We've got 20 minutes, Paul. So let me wrap up with the last 2. And then we can do some questions. So the last 2 is number 6. Number 6 is, please don't make this mistake that I did. So when I was in the 1990s building my accounting firm, I would go and meet prospective clients, and everything would go well to start with. I came from a tax background, so I would talk about some tax planning ideas. I'd deliver some value in that first meeting. And I remember in many of the meetings, the client would say, wow, Mark, this is amazing. I've never had this input, this advice, this ideas from my existing accountant. Tell me, what's it going to cost? And at that point, I'd have this cold sweat. I'd panic. I don't know. I've never worked with you before. I don't know how long it's going to take. So I'd get that reaction. And so what I would say is, I'd say, that's a great question. Let me go away and think about it, and I'll draft something in writing and I'll send it to you through the post. Now, I don't know if you remember the post, but in the 1990s we had the post. You would probably email it now. And that was my mistake I made. I would email people the price afterwards. And here's the problem with that. This is a huge mistake. I wish I didn't do it. It's stupid when you think about it. Have you ever asked someone for a quote? It may be that you want your house painting and decorating. So you go to Painter and Decorators and you say, can you send me a quote? Maybe you want your garden sorting out. You go to Landscape Gardeners. Think about when you get a proposal or a quote. I have developers creating my pricing software, and they send me proposals for the next development they're going to do. When you get a proposal, what's the first thing you look for? And I know what it is, because when I get the proposal from my developers, I go straight to the bottom. I'm looking for the price. We all look for the price. And your clients are just the same. And when we see that price, because that's the first thing we look for, we don't read the rest of it, we just go straight to the price. We see a number, and in our minds we make an instant judgment like that. Usually, that's a bit expensive. That's more than I'm expecting. And here's the problem. You've lost control. You're not sat there in front of them. You've sent this through by email or through the post. And so you're not there. You've lost control of the process. And what I found back in the 1990s is I would often have brilliant meetings with prospective clients. I'd think that went well. I'll get them. I'd send the proposal out. And because I'm an introvert and I had a fear of the phone, I would sit there with my fingers crossed thinking, please ring. And the phone would never ring. And then eventually when I chased up some weeks or months later, I'd found out that what happened is they got the proposal, they saw the price, that's expensive they thought. They went to their existing accountant and said, just had this, can you beat it? And you know what the other accountant will say, because we all play the same game, yes, we can do it cheaper. And that's why as a profession we are just all undercutting each other and competing on price, which is stupid. It's why we're working such crazy hard hours and not making enough money. Remember, your clients are not price sensitive. They will pay you more. Your clients will pay you more when we are better at communicating the value of what we do. So that's mistake number 6. We must not send proposals through the mail. We must have the price conversation face to face. That's critical when it comes to value pricing. We need a process for giving a value-based price with confidence in front of the client. And finally, how are we doing? We've got 15 minutes. So the final one that I will share with you, I thought, seeing as we've now come through, this interesting pandemic that's been a huge issue, and so my last thing is, how should we price? Thinking about the future over the next year or so, how should we start pricing? What are some of the things that I've learned during the last 18 months, particularly in 2021, when the pandemic hit? And what I found is I've seen lots of people ask me questions, and I've seen on Facebook groups people saying things like, my clients are really struggling right now, so what should I do? Should I reduce my prices? And what I see is, again, another big mistake in the profession, is that when times are tough, and yes, 2021 and the start of this year has been tough for older businesses, but it's not unique. We've had lots of tough times. We've had big recessions. Think about, was it 2007, the start of the banking crisis? We have tough times. And the mistake that we often make is when times are tough, we keep our prices low. We reduce our prices in the belief that we're trying to help our clients. And that's a big mistake. We have to recognize that, firstly, that when we have tough times, not everybody struggles. I've noticed in the last 18 months, a lot of people I've spoken to have had the best 18 months of their business. I have. My business is better in the last 18 months than ever before. And a lot of other people are telling me the same thing. A lot of other accountants tell me about their clients. Not everybody struggles in tough times. Some people thrive. Some people become more creative when there's tough times and figure out a way of redesign their business in a way that actually ends up being more profitable. Not everybody struggles. So we shouldn't reduce our price just because times are tough. The other reason we shouldn't reduce our prices, and arguably we can put our prices up, is when we start to understand this concept of pricing based on value, not based on how long something takes. When we price based on value, then everything changes up here. We start to think much more about, well, what more value can we create for our clients, and how can we communicate that value? And when times are tough, like during COVID, there have been many opportunities for us to help our clients who are struggling, but thankfully there have been various government grants, incentives, loans and other things to help clients get through these tough times of COVID. And we're the people that are best placed to help our clients tap into that government money, those loans and so on, to help the client get through. And when we are helping clients tap into those things, when we're pointing in the right direction, when we're helping them with their cash flow so they can survive these tough times, we are delivering extraordinary value. We're helping save businesses. And when we're delivering extraordinary value and helping save businesses, then we should be rewarded for that, which means we should be charging higher prices in tough times, not lower prices, because we can make a bigger difference. Now, it may be that some clients can't be saved. Some clients will go out of business in tough times. And one of the things I think that COVID's shown is that, and it's hard to say it, but it's true, some people just shouldn't be in business. There are some people who fell into business and they don't have a very good business model. And tough times sometimes find out those people. We can't save everybody, we're not superhuman, but we have enough great clients that we can make a profound difference to by helping to rethink their business, to change their business model, to tap into finance, whatever it might well be, to help them come out of these tough times in ways where they were stronger than when we went in. So we don't reduce our prices when times are tough. And right now, moving into the next 12 months, I see a world of opportunity. I see a world of extraordinary things. The world's opening up. And suddenly things are possible now which haven't been possible for quite some time. Travel's now opening up. There are now people starting to now thrive again. This is a huge opportunity to start doing amazing things with businesses. And we should be pricing accordingly, pricing according to the value that we are creating. Paul, they're my 7 tips. What I will do very quickly is we'll look at some questions, Paul, and perhaps you might have some questions. We've got 12 minutes. Before I do that, let me just quickly share in the chat box some links to some free stuff if anyone likes free stuff. I have a few resources that people like. And while I'm doing that, Paul, you might want to think about what's the questions that I should deal with. So,
we've got lots of questions, so I don't even have to think about them, which is
I'll give you 30 seconds to think about those. I'm going to share 3 things in the chat box. Firstly, if you want a copy of that benchmarking survey I mentioned earlier on how the profession's pricing for bookkeeping services, I've put a link to that in the chat box. So feel free to have that. Second out of 3 links for you is I have a Facebook group of about just short of 9,000 accountants that I'm helping on this pricing journey. So feel free to join my Facebook group. And thirdly, and most important, is, as Paul mentioned earlier, I run the Value Pricing Academy, which is where I work at a deep, close level with firms every single month. But the best place to start, if you've never worked with me before, is come on to my free training. I run free events 2 or 3 times, if not more, a month. And so if you want to be on the VIP list, which means once a week on a Monday, I send out an email on a Monday morning with the...
Mark, can you do one thing? I think on those posts that you just did, you're actually posting it on panelists, and we need to do it to everyone.
I've realised
so could
that.
You just repost the links? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sharon, for letting us know that. Okay, I was seeing them, but no one else was. Yes.
So there we go. List. Let me go back to that's the 3rd one, I think. Last one going. Okay, I think that's all 3 now in the chat box.
You got them.
Just in a different order to what I said.
Yes, that's okay. They're still good links. All right. Super. Sorry, Mark, you were in the middle of saying something about the group, I think.
I was, but it doesn't matter. People can just click on the links. They can read the stuff. If they want to get support from me, they can do. Let's answer some questions, Paul.
Okay. Well, there've been lots of them. So thank you everybody for answering the questions, and thank you, Mark, for those 7 things. First one, someone said, Chris said, mistake number 3. Here's the question: shouldn't we, i.e., the professional? Oh, you're going to have fun with this. Shouldn't we, i.e. the professional, be telling the client what they need rather than the client telling us what they want?
Clients don't know what they need. Clients do not know what they need. So one of the things that we have to do, I teach something called the 3 stages of the value conversation that we have to do in the right order. Stage 1 is we have to uncover the value. We have to find out what it is that people want. And then in stage 2 is where we build up the value. Stage 2 is where we build the value through A, creating more value, and B, communicating that so people get it. And then stage 3 is where we capture the value. And capturing the value means we come up with a price that's based on the value that we've created, not on the hours that we spend. So there's those 3 stages. So when we talk to a client, the price bit is the last bit. Sometimes people think that value pricing is all about coming up with the price. That's a really small part of value pricing. Exactly, the biggest bit of value pricing is actually communicating value. It's as you said before, Paul, words are so important. Words are critical. And so when we uncover the value, the first thing we want to do is ask questions. We want to start to understand what's important to the client. We want to understand what's their challenges right now? What's their pain? What's the problems they're facing? What are their goals in life? What are their goals in their business? Because clients don't know what they want. An example, Paul, would be a client comes to you and says, I need a cash flow forecast. Can you do a cash flow forecast and what will it cost? And we say proudly, yes, we can do a cash flow forecast. It's going to cost you £500. And we are giving a client exactly what they don't need. Nobody needs or wants a cash flow forecast. I've never gone into a business and seen framed on the wall a cash flow forecast. There is zero value in a cash flow forecast. Value is in what it does for them.
Yeah.
And we have to ask the right questions to uncover what is the ultimate thing they want. Why do they want a cash flow forecast? What are they looking to achieve? Because when we understand that at a deeper level, when we understand and ask the right questions, then we can figure out, okay, so yes, we'll deliver a cash flow forecast, but there's many more things we can and should do to help them get a better result, to get the result they really need. Hope that helps.
And Mike, just on that, why is it, do you think, that so many in the profession are sort of fixated on the inputs rather than the outcomes? Why is that? Because once you fixate on the outcomes, you get a totally different perception of the value that you create.
I wish I knew. I don't know. I think that people understand conceptually that we should create more value, but I think it's because we are so ingrained in this whole thing about measuring time and hours and keeping timesheets, and I don't want to get into the debate about should you keep timesheets or not, because Ron will maybe have great arguments for that. But the single biggest problem I see with timesheets is, even though a lot of people say I don't price based on the hour, while ever you have the timesheets, it's your crutch to lean back on. In other words, if something difficult comes along to price, we then go back to thinking about hours. If we didn't have any timesheets at all, if that was taken away from us, it forces us to be more creative with pricing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, as you said, it's that value conversation that is really the part of it. The pricing is just this little tiny little piece of it. Someone asked this question. I've never been asked this one before, and you're always better at answering questions than I am. So here's what it says, and this is Jerry. Thank you for this. If you value price, how do you deal with a situation where two clients pay different prices for the same service, and they discuss their fees and ask you why they're different? I think I know what you'll say to that one, but anyway, go.
Well, one of the things I find is that a lot of these objections that accountants have are what I call imaginary objections. We worry about these things in our mind. What if this happens? What if this happens? Clients don't generally talk to each other about their prices and stuff. It very rarely happens. But even if it does, they're different. They're not. They've got different businesses. They've got different businesses. They've probably got different goals that goals in life. When you have the value conversation, you uncover the value. It may be one is more ambitious and wants to create more, and so the solution you've created for them, the more expensive solution, builds in some advisory, some extra meetings, and helping them to come up with strategies for their business. Everyone's different. And I know that when Ron's asked this question, the answer he gives is it's like the airline industry. Everybody on the plane pays a different price. And we all know that. As customers, we know that our price is different to everybody else apart from our partner. And we accept that. That's just the way that life is.
Mark, thank you so much for kicking off Pricing Month. It has been absolutely amazing being with you. So thrilled. Thank you for dealing with that nice, the kind of difficult camera issue as well. On the front of it. And Mark, as a result of all of this, make sure that you enjoy a fabulous holiday.